Do want to get you right back into your headlines here as Jeffrey Epstein's accomplice, Ghislaine Maxwell, has been transferred to an all-female minimum security federal prison camp in Texas 10 days before she was expected to be called to testify before Congress. Maxwell is currently serving out a 20-year prison sentence after being convicted of sex trafficking minors. She was previously housed at a low-security facility in Tallahassee, Florida, one that included both men and women. That's where just a little more than a week ago, U.S. Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche interviewed her for several hours over a 2-day period. Prison officials confirming Maxwell is now in that prison camp in Bryan, Texas, and you see it right there on your screen. All of this as the controversy continues over the potential release of the Epstein files and questions over whether Maxwell would be granted some type of immunity or even a pardon in exchange for testimony. And it's important to note that the House Oversight Chair has now announced that that August 11th testimony is not going to happen. It is postponed, quote unquote, indefinitely. A lot to discuss, so I do want to bring in Spencer Kuvin, the chief legal officer of Goldlaw. He represented 9 of Jeffrey Epstein's victims, including the first victim, that is victim number 1. Spencer, as always, thank you so much for taking the time to join us here on Live Now from Fox.
Thank you for having me this morning. I appreciate it.
Of course. And first off, a lot of people were posting all over social media just yesterday as that announcement was made that Ghislaine Maxwell had been moved from the facility in Florida over to one in Texas. What went through your mind when you first heard that?
Well, I'm not surprised. Inmates like this, and I've taken the deposition of numerous sex traffickers that have been in jail, in fact, one just the other week. They are not required to speak with authorities at that point. They can basically tell authorities, forget it, I don't want to talk to you, go away. So there had to be some kind of a cookie, some kind of a positive there on her behalf that she could negotiate for in order to be able to give that interview. So the likelihood is that this deal about the transfer to a cushier and nicer facility was probably pre-struck even before the interview took place. And it was a quid pro quo. If she talks to the DOJ again, then the DOJ agrees that we'll transfer her to a nicer facility. Now we just need to learn what she said.
And what's interesting is we did learn from Representative Comer here with the House Oversight Committee that essentially that testimony that we've been hearing a lot about over the past couple weeks here is not going to happen, despite that subpoena being issued for August 11th. Not going to happen. It's postponed, quote unquote, indefinitely. We know that Ghislaine Maxwell's attorney put out a statement initially saying that she wanted some type of immunity there, and Comer responded and said that's not going to happen. So what role do you think that all of that played? And do you think we're actually going to see any sort of congressional testimony from Maxwell at any point?
Well, it's frustrating. Obviously we want to be able to see what she has to say, but someone who is asking and demanding for immunity is someone who's committed numerous crimes and doesn't want to be prosecuted for them. So obviously she's a criminal. She's also a convicted liar. So anything she has to say should be taken very suspect. What I really want to see, and what I know the victims want to see, is the surveillance video. Let's see all of the files, all of the video that the DOJ has in its custody and the FBI has in its possession, over 1,000 hours of videotape. Release the video. The president could sign an executive order requesting the DOJ or demanding the DOJ release that information tomorrow. The documented evidence, the videotapes taken inside the mansions in Palm Beach and New York and the Virgin Islands, that's evidence. That can't lie. A picture and a video tell 1,000 words, and that's what we want to see.
One thing that's interesting has been this discussion about immunity or a pardon. We know that we heard from Maxwell's attorney right after that meeting with Deputy U.S. Attorney General, I should say, Blanche. Now, after that meeting, he was asked, the attorney, if he did have any sort of plans to ask for a pardon, and he said, quote unquote, not yet. Do you think that Ghislaine Maxwell being granted any kind of pardon is an actual reality? Is it a realistic possibility?
I mean, I certainly hope not, right? Because the victims have already been through frustrating actions by the U.S. government, as well as the state attorney here in Palm Beach, between the sweetheart deal that was cut with Epstein, letting him die in jail, and now the theory that they may pardon the one person that they put on trial and convicted. it would be an atrocity at the end of the day. Having said that, look, I could see where if she was to give evidence and testify about other individuals, people that were perpetrators that could be prosecuted, then that could lead to what's called a commutation, which may be a couple of years shaved off of her sentence. But a full pardon, she should never be pardoned under any circumstance.
Are your clients still hopeful that at some point we will see maybe more prosecutions, more charges that are issued in this whole situation here? Obviously, we're talking years and years later, but are they still remaining hopeful there?
The victims are always hopeful. They just keep getting frustrated by the federal government. That's the problem. But yes, I mean, since the beginning, we have always said that there are co-conspirators that have been involved in this entire process. Epstein was not a man acting alone. He had Ghislaine Maxwell at his side, but he also had numerous others that were involved in this conspiracy that need to be held to account. Justice needs to be had for all of the people that were involved in this, because if there's no accountability, this is going to happen again with another rich and famous and wealthy individual, unfortunately.
One thing that I've asked you in the past, and I want to ask you again here, a lot of people have their own thoughts about exactly what happened here, the case itself. They see a lot of information and really disinformation that's swirling around on social media and on various media websites. Is there any sort of misconception, misunderstanding that you want to clarify for folks out there who are watching about all of this?
I think that if there was any potential misunderstanding that I've seen in the media or in social media recently, is this concept of Ghislaine being some kind of a victim as well of Epstein. She was no victim. This is a woman that sought out and hunted young girls on the street, would literally pull over cars and walk up to them to convince them to come to Epstein's mansion. She was involved directly in some of the sex trafficking and the sexploitation of victims that I've represented. So she is by no means a victim. She is a perpetrator, and she belongs behind bars where she is for a very long time.
All right, Spencer, thank you so much, as always, for taking the time to join us and help break it all down. Obviously, a lot to discuss here, so I'm sure we'll have you on again very soon. Anything else that you want to add about any of this before I let you go?
We want to see the video. That is the absolute end all. We want to see the videotapes. That's what the victims want, and we need the public to be clamoring for that at every step.
All right, thank you again, Spencer, for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it.
Thank you.